Good afternoon. Dean Node, thank you for your kind introduction. Thank you also for your invitation to speak this afternoon and to address this class of new proud graduates, their families and friends and colleagues from the university and beyond. It's truly an honor to be here today and to share with you on the Treaty of Maastricht and the European Union a few thoughts on where we find ourselves. But before I do so, before I talk about the Treaty of Maastricht and the European Union, I want to start, which is of course only natural, only normal. I want to start with congratulating wholeheartedly the heroes of the day, you, the new graduates, for their academic achievement. For you, new graduates and your families and friends, graduation has to be a day of great pride and celebration. For you graduates, it is probably, I remember when I was a student, the accumulation of years of hard work, dedication and commitment. You are not succeeding if you are not working hard and being dedicated and committed. As for your families, your friends, it is Harvest Day, so to speak, the celebration of years of love and support, so that children and loved ones, their degree in hand, can move forward and succeed even further in life. In fact, in the United States, where I teach and where I regularly attend graduation ceremonies at my university, Rutgers University near New York City, each time I can see that parents, friends, supporters, those who have been behind the students throughout their academic journey are often happier and even more moved to see their loved ones graduating than the graduates themselves. And I see the families over there, so I guess this is your feeling today. So heartfelt congratulations to the new graduates, their families and friends. This is no small achievement to reach the finish line, so to speak. New graduates, you will see that having studied at the Maastricht School of Management, often coming, as we mentioned, from very far away, since the school student body is very international, will prove to be a great educational, professional, and even, I think, human investment. As you know, the Maastricht School of Management is one of the oldest in the Netherlands and also one of the most vibrant and innovative schools in the country, but also in Europe. And I am sure that over the years you will come to value more and more your association with Maastricht. And as you get older, it happens to all of us, unfortunately, you will also perhaps take the measure as life of how life goes quickly, and you will probably also look back on your time here with some nostalgia. So this is my word to you for you in terms of the graduation. That said, let me now turn to the topic on my presentation. 25 years after Maastricht, legitimacies at war in Europe, and for which I have been given more or less 40 minutes. Okay, so I'll try to be brief. So earlier in the summer, in my conversations with Wim about a possible theme for today's presentation, Wim thought that since this year we are since this year marks the 25th anniversary of the Treaty of Maastricht, it would be good to focus on the treaty and its legacy. As I am sure you know, the Treaty of Maastricht is called after the fact that the city of Maastricht hosted in December 1991 the European Council, which drafted the treaty. with the treaty then being signed in Maastricht in February 1992. Also, the question of the Treaty of Maastricht is all the more relevant today, since, as Wim mentioned, and as you probably are all aware of, the European Union is now at a crossroad, facing major challenges, with perhaps its future hanging in the balance. Also, since I myself, before working with the United Nations and now as a university professor, I started my career working with the European Union, more specifically with the European Parliament as a young man. I thought it could be valuable to reflect a bit on where the Treaty of Maastricht and the European Union stand now, and what could be the prospects for the future. So since my presentation is part of a graduation ceremony at the School here of Management and not a seminar presentation, and since I don't have much time, I'll be quite straightforward and not too technical, or not technical at all, in fact. Okay? So I will limit myself to share with you a few thoughts on the treaty and what it means to the current state of the European Union. And as such, as it is the tradition in France, I organize my presentation around 4 main points. I'm from France, so footnote. So 4 points, if you will. In fact, it's 3 points in France. So but having spent time in America, it's 4 points now. So first, since not all of us are necessarily very familiar with the Treaty of Maastricht, I intend to quickly recall some of the key aspects of the treaty. Second, I will allude to the state of the European Union today, and here, without overlooking too much the accomplishments of Maastricht, I focus on the challenges that it is facing today. It is essentially to these challenges that I am referring to in the title of my presentation, which is a bit perhaps too dramatic, when I talk about legitimacies at war. Third, I will mention a few suggestions that could help the European Union to move forward. And fourth, and finally, and perhaps more importantly for you new graduates, I will conclude with a few lessons for the young generation. After all, what would be the value of reflecting on the past if it doesn't help the young generation to do and be better than its elders? So let me first quickly highlight a few, in fact, 4 key points, so 4 key aspects, I think, of the Treaty of Maastricht. So first aspect, and none of this is rocket science, all this is quite known. First aspect, so the Treaty of Maastricht, also known as the Treaty of the European Union, is usually presented as a turning point in the European Union integration process, by building upon, but also modifying previous European treaties. The Treaty of Maastricht wanted to go beyond the initial economic objective of establishing a common market. It aimed at establishing a political union at the European level. I think we all know this. And so, to the general public, the establishment of a European citizenship with the creation of a European passport, I have one, is one of the most visible and most concrete illustrations of this idea of political union. In fact, as you travel in Europe and around the world, being from Europe, this is something that you experience very, very concretely. But of course, part of the European integration agenda was also the strengthening of the economic and monetary union, in particular with the introduction of the famous or infamous, depending on where you stand, euro as the European currency. Enhancing social and economic cohesion among the various regions, countries of the European Union was another element of the Treaty of Maastricht, in terms of moving toward political union. So this is one aspect. The second key aspect of the treaty is the idea that the Treaty of Maastricht has strengthened and was eager to strengthen the European Union supranational institutions, in particular the European Commission, responsible, as we know, for proposing legislation and implementing decisions, the European Parliament, exercising the legislative functions of the European Union, and the Court of Justice, meant to monitor compliance with European Community law. And so, as we all know, of course, this strengthened supranational dimension is part of the Treaty of Maastricht, has been a source of worries and concerns for those concerned with a lessening or even a loss of national sovereignty for European member states. At least in France, it has been really the bone of contention. Third aspect of the treaty, very much related to the issues of division of power and distribution of sovereignty among member states and the European Union, is the fact that the Treaty of Maastricht established what is called the principle of subsidiarity as a general rule. Before, this principle had only been applied to environmental policy. And in fact, this principle of subsidiarity is perhaps the best known general principle of European Union law. When I teach European Union law in the US, this is the only principle that my students know about. And maybe the only thing that they know about the European Union, unfortunately. But in any case, this principle is very important, and it is critically important because it indicates that in areas that are not within its exclusive powers, the European Union will only take action where objectives can be best attained by action at the European Union level rather than at the national level. So this is a very, very important aspect of the treaty. But of course, and not very surprisingly, the principle of subsidiarity has often become a battleground for disputes about distribution of competencies between the European Union and national government. So these are the three key aspects of the treaty. The fourth and final one has to do with the fact that the treaty envisioned, in the context of intergovernmental cooperation, a more common approach to foreign and security policies and other issues such as the environment, policing, and social policy. And incidentally, I recall that at the time I was working for the European Parliament and therefore the European Union to be, as a young legislative assistant, most of my work in the context of the preparation of the Treaty of Maastricht had to do with this fourth aspect, in particular the formulation and extension of social policy at the European Community level, and that was quite interesting. In any case, later on, subsequent European treaties, like the Treaty of Amsterdam, 1997, the Treaty of Nice, 2001, and the Treaty of Lisbon, which is also very important, 2007. So subsequent European treaties, agreements, followed in the footsteps, by and large, of the key dispositions and policy inflections and orientations of the Treaty of Maastricht. And this is why, despite, of course, the significance of the European treaties adopted after Maastricht and all the work which has been done in the past 25 years, the Treaty of Maastricht continues to be viewed as an especially important inflection point and marker in the history and evolution of the European project. So this is what I wanted to say about the key aspect of the treaty very quickly, very briefly. Of course, more would need to be said, but I'll stop here for this. So let me now fast forward and say a few words on where we are today with the European Union and the legacy of the Treaty of Maastricht. And as we all know, as Wim mentioned, this is not an entirely happy story. And this is why I want to focus here first and foremost on the challenges that the European Union is facing, in particular what I call perhaps too dramatically legitimacies at war or wars of legitimacy in the European region. And of course, in this regard, focusing on the challenges as I do here doesn't mean that there are not plenty of positive things, plenty of success stories with the European Union. There are indeed, as we all know, many success stories, many positive things. After all, although there is trouble in the European region, although there is trouble in the so-called European house, Europe is still one of the most economically and socially advanced country in the world. You know, I'm coming to Maastricht for the second time, and I'm impressed by what I see in Maastricht and in general in the Netherlands. So, I mean, we're also doing quite well in Europe. We have to think this, it's very important. And also Europe is politically as well as in security terms very stable region of the world. Focusing on the challenges that the European Union is facing today doesn't mean either that the European Union is alone, as we tend to think, at least as the one criticizing the European Union tend to think, that the European Union alone is responsible for all the problems that it and its member states may be encountering. In this perspective, it seems to me that it is more accurate and also perhaps more fruitful, intellectually speaking, politically speaking, and psychologically speaking, to think that the problems that the European Union and its member states are encountering today are often, more than anything else, a matter of what I call co-responsibility, a matter of shared responsibility on the part of the key European actors. And thinking about problems in terms of co-responsibility is very important, because if you simply think that it's always the fault of others, it's very difficult to see the problems and solve the problems. That said, it's also true that there is a real malaise with the European Union and the economic, social, political, and institutional cultures. I talk about cultures rather than one culture, because I think the European Union is an agglomeration of a variety of cultures from this economic, social, political, and social point of views, and cultures that the Treaty of Maastricht has contributed to set in motion about 25 years ago. And if we want at one point to overcome this malaise and not fall into a sense of complacency, which could inevitably lead to a sense of crisis even deeper than the one in which we are perhaps, so we have to tackle this malaise. And it will be all the more foolish to ignore this malaise and to ignore the problems at hand, considering that they amount, these problems, to a weakened or even to perhaps a deficit of legitimacy. This is quite trendy in Europe to talk about a democratic deficit. I think that we have a variety of legitimacy deficit. It's not only one deficit. And so this weakened or deficit of legitimacy is quite significant, because once a political system begins losing or lacking legitimacy, the community that this political system contributes to managing and holding together, I think, is at risk, and in the worst circumstances runs the risk of disintegrating. Indeed, when a political system enjoys a high or reasonably high level of legitimacy, that is to say, when it brings together the various legitimacies, in other words, the various core principles and core values with which people identify, and core values, core principles serving as guidelines and benchmarks for legitimate government, this political system is working well, and as such contributes to the possibility and sustainability of living together. But when this is not the case, when the legitimacy of the political system, of the overall management of society is weak or unraveling somewhat, dangerous tensions, if not wars of legitimacy, develop among core principles and core values of society. And in the process, it's not only the legitimacy of political leaders and institutions that is challenged, which is, I think, partly the case in Europe and a number of member states, but it is also the possibility of living together in a given community, the possibility of experiencing a sense of community that is threatened. When there is no political legitimacy, or when legitimacy is weakened, community runs the risk of fading away. And so, without wanting to be overly dramatic here, I'm tempted to say that today, at times, at the European, but also at the national level, this is a bit the situation in which we find ourselves. To be sure, as I said earlier, there are plenty of good things, very good things, about Europe, in Europe, at the member states and at the European Union levels. But as I also said, we have serious problems, some serious problems in the context of which, and I think this is one of the key issues, the sense of solidarity and responsibility toward one another at the collective level as well as at the individual level appears to be a bit eroding. And such erosion of solidarity and responsibility toward another, I think, is something that we have to think seriously about. And precisely in this perspective, I think that we can identify two interrelated areas in which the problems seems to be at work. So one area concerns questions of governance, another area concerns questions of policy, and I hope you are still with me. Yes? I haven't lost you. No? Okay. So, concerning questions of, it happens sometimes. So concerning questions of governance, it is first at the national level that the challenges are accumulating. Surely not all European Union countries are in trouble. The Netherlands seems to be doing very well. Thank you. So that's good. And clearly some of them are doing much better than others. But we also have to recognize that there are a number of European countries, in particular historical members of the European Union, where confronted that they are with serious economic, social and political difficulties, the stability and legitimacy of their political system, but also the social fabric of society seem to be a bit threatened. This is certainly the case in France. We have tons of problems in France, but maybe also in Spain, Greece, and to some extent Italy. More generally, in many European nations, the rising trend of populism is an indication of the growing difficulties of European national governments to satisfy the economic and social demands of those left out, of the losers of the liberalization of the economy, with the crisis as a translation, the crisis of political representation and the move toward the political extremes that follow. Economic crisis brings about political crisis. So this is one level of governance at which we encounter some serious difficulties, the national level. The European Union level is the second level of problematic governance. And here it seems to me that it's mainly two types of issues that are a source of discontent and negative perceptions. First, issues of policy orientations, and second, issues of transparency and participation. So when it comes to policy orientation, nothing more than what is called now economic austerity, with which the European Union seemed to have aligned itself in the aftermath of the 2008 financial and economic crisis. So nothing more than this appears to be a cause of tension among and within countries and between the European Union and member states. And once again, we can talk about whether or not this is justified, but clearly there is the sentiment that economic austerity is a problem at the European Union level. Issues of transparency are also a concern, since to many, the European Commission appears to be deciding much behind closed doors and allowing only a few actors and a few self-interested actors to sit and to sit comfortably at the decision-making table. That this perception corresponds to the reality or not ultimately doesn't matter very much, since it seems to have now settled in the minds of many people throughout Europe as the true color, and this is quite unfortunate, of Brussels. Third, not surprisingly, the relationship between the national and European levels is another level where governance is viewed as having serious limitations. And here, of course, the single most contentious issue is the fear of losing national control or sovereignty, and this is one aspect, although only one aspect, of the so-called Brexit story. When it comes to questions of policy, I told you there are two ways to think about the problems, the governance level and then the policy level. So when it comes to questions of policy as a cause of discontent and divisions, I have talked about very briefly the issue of economic austerity, and this is certainly a source of major tensions. But I think that more generally, it is the elusive, what I call the elusive quest for security, that tends to put the legitimacy of the European Union and its member states at risk. More than anything else, in Europe today, I think, a lot of people are experiencing a deep sense of insecurity, and therefore are looking for security, are therefore putting more than ever a premium on security. Above all, people are looking for economic, job and social security, scared that they are by the downsides of globalization and high levels of unemployment. And people are also looking for physical security, so to speak, scared as they are by terrorism. And so it is on all these fronts that the European Union and member states, at least a number of them, do not appear to be able to deliver as much as expected by people, do not appear to find the right balance between too much security, which is not good, people fall asleep, and too much insecurity, which is not good either, because people are a bit, scared. And yet this balance is absolutely essential, because I tend to think that it is a key device in order to achieve at the social economic level efficiency and fairness in a society. So unless we find this balance between too much security and too much insecurity, I think and this is of course a balance important in all societies, I think that here in Europe we'll continue to be in trouble. So the net result of this overall state of affairs, which, as I told you, is not an entirely happy one, of course, is that there is a weakened European and national sense of legitimacy, and this, once again, is happening on what I call three fronts. The policy front, the policy front, and the political front. So on the policy front, there is a weakened legitimacy concerning the policies adopted and the unfortunate outcomes people feel they generate. So, problem on the policy front. There is also a weakened legitimacy on the political front, with relations among member states and between the European Union and member states perhaps becoming less and less cooperative and more competitive, that is to say, even acrimonious. So there is a second front, the political front, in terms of political actors, and there is also a weakened legitimacy on the polity front. Polity being a Greek word as a way to talk about the sense of national community, the sense of community. So there is a weakened legitimacy on the polity front, with people certainly not feeling that they belong to an European people and a European polity, which was supposed to be part of the goal of the European Union, and even feeling less and less that they belong to a national polity. And maybe this problem of polity is the one which summarizes the most the extent of the difficulties that we are encountering, because in the end, in political union, in European Union, you have union, and if there is no union, there is no community, and therefore then you have a polity problem. And the growing disparity of power among European nations, like between Germany and France, only adds another layer of difficulty to the situation, of course. Needless to say, because of the problems I just mentioned, we are as far as we can be from the possibility and the realization of a so-called European dream, the way we talk about an American dream. And of course, we are as far as can be from the possibility and the realization of the United States of Europe, an expression that at times has been used in the past to coin a potential orientation and appeal of the European project. We used to talk about the European dream, about the the United States of Europe. We're not really talking about this anymore. And in a way, we shouldn't be too surprised by the fact that there is this gap between Europe and the idea of a dream, the idea of a United States of Europe. After all, beyond the current problems of the European Union, the European project, by the very nature of Europe history, I think cannot bring about a type of attractive and mobilizing dream mythology and federation similar to that existing in the United States. Furthermore, it's not as if the American political system was so great that it could and should serve as a model for Europe. What we see in these days in terms of the presidential campaign in the US is certainly not very appealing. In any case, background, in any case, again, this background, the question that we have to think about and hopefully answer is the following: what to do? What to do to overcome the tough situation in which Europe finds itself 25 years after the Treaty of Maastricht. And once again, not all is bad. There is plenty of good in Europe. So this question, what to do, is a difficult question to answer. And the fact that despite all its challenges, the European Union is probably going to stay. I think it will stay. So it doesn't make it easier to answer the question. At the moment, by and large, political and economic elites are committed to the pursuit of the European project. This is really something that you see throughout Europe. At this point, also it would be very difficult and costly for European countries to extract themselves from the European enterprise. The highly complicated process that the United Kingdom's exit promises to be is an illustration of this. And more importantly, there is not really today a credible and viable alternative to the European path. I'm finishing soon, so be patient. I'm finishing soon. Yeah, it's a bit hot here. There is no air conditioning. It's a hot weather. Mm-hmm. Oh, there is? Something to be fixed. I continue and I finish soon. Be patient. So, still at the same time, something has to be done because these problems are really serious. Something has to change. Short of this, the European crisis or crises will deepen, and the disconnect existing between the European Union member states and people is likely to grow further. You are lucky because, in fact, initially, Wim asked me to speak for 2 hours. So imagine. I'm just kidding. So as a way to perhaps help thinking about the future and come up with suggestions, I think we can keep in mind 4 types of considerations as a way to really, think about the future. So these considerations are historical, political, institutional, and yes, psychological considerations. So, concerning historical considerations, I think it's important to take the measure of the changed context of today compared to the early 1990s, internally and externally, and reflect on what this means for the European Union and its member states. In the early 1990s, you will not remember, you were too young, feelings of hope and optimism really tended to dominate the day. This was the end of the Cold War, and there was the sentiment that new possibilities and positive developments were emerging. At the time, I was beginning my professional career with the European Union and the UN, and that was really the mood of the time. Of course, globalization had its detractors and skeptics, but more often than not, globalization was also viewed as a source of great opportunities. I mean, Clinton in the 1990s in the US was elected on this idea of bringing hope, on this idea of making globalization work for everybody in the US. It didn't work that way, but now, 25 years later, if I had to put emotions on the present atmosphere, I would say that disenchantment, for sure, and perhaps even fear, tend to win the day. It is not that the world is necessarily more dangerous, more uncertain than 25 years ago, but clearly there is a sense of confusion and worries that colors our time. So while the early 1990s were the beginning of a cycle, we should probably, and this is the historical consideration that I put on the table, we should probably now think in terms of the end of this cycle and start to assess the nature of the new cycle that is beginning, of the new cycle which perhaps has already begun for a few years. As for political considerations, they come down to the issue of representation. I mean, I think that throughout the world we have nowadays a problem of political representation, and this is very much the case in Europe. As long as people will think that they are not well represented or less and less represented at the European level, at the European Union and at the national levels, this question of representation, of crisis of representation, will be both an illustration and a source of weak and weakening legitimacy. As we know, the question of representation, central to modern democracy, is also one of the most difficult questions of democracy, including in Europe. Who can represent us? This is the issue of the identity of the representatives. On what basis? This is the issue of the substance of the policies for which we want to be represented, and via which mechanisms. And so these are three questions that we continue today in Europe having difficulty answering with satisfactions at the European level, but also at the national level. Indeed, these questions, which are already difficult to answer at the national level, are all the more difficult to answer, to address and answer at the European regional level, at the European regional level, where not only European people per se doesn't really exist, but where the non-existence of this non-European people, of this European people, has to be coordinated with existing national peoples who themselves think that they are less and less really taken into account, feel that they are more and more under attack. And yet, if we do not find a way to address this problem of political representation in Europe, I think that it will be quite difficult to move forward in a constructive and hopeful fashion. And of course, part of the answer to this political question of representation is institutional. That is, it's about trying to imagine and put in place better institutional mechanisms of representation so that people regain trust and confidence in their representatives, which is, of course, key. Their representative, that is to say, their elected representatives, politicians, but also selected representatives, bureaucrats and officials, because I think that there is a double crisis of representation in Europe. It's about elected representatives, politicians, but also selected representatives, the bureaucrats and officials. And so, thinking about how to reimagine, if you will, better institutional mechanism is, of course, a massive endeavor, which probably entails rethinking, among other things. And I have been a bureaucrat all my life, so I'm not. I'm just talking about these things, in a very candid fashion. I could defend my camp, but I don't think that it's the way to go. So I'm just being honest about these things. I used to be a French bureaucrat, I was a European bureaucrat, and then I have been a UN bureaucrat. But if we are not really, if we are blind to the problems, once again, we cannot find the solutions. So rethinking this situation is a massive endeavor, which probably entails rethinking, among other things, the nature and role of political parties in the 21st century, often more and more discredited as a modality of selection of political elites, but also as a modality of formulation of laws and policies. In the US, where I live, the frequent hijacking of lawmaking in Congress by private interests, the privatization of lawmaking, but also the privatization of politics in general, is clearly a major issue. And I'm told that this is increasingly a problem in Europe at the national level, but also at the European level. So, ways to think about the future: historical, political, institutional, and then finally psychological. Indeed, it seems to me that part of the answer to the political question of representation is also psychological. And by this here, I mean the psychology of those in commanding and leadership positions. It seems to me that leadership is more about listening, understanding, and making sense of the people the leader is leading than about ordering people around without listening to them, without understanding them, what they are about. And yet, it happens that this ability to listen, understand, and create meaning for the ones being led is today frequently overlooked by our politicians. Deafness seems to be, we could say, a widespread psychological illness, so to speak, among politicians nowadays, including in Europe. And I talk about deafness as a psychological illness because it's not that politicians could not physically listen and hear. I think that they don't want for their own survival, but in the process, I think that they self-destruct. So in any case, this kind of deafness brings about quite many obstacles for effective and productive leadership. So I'm finishing. So, sight of relief. Yes. Okay? So, and I haven't spoken for 2 hours. So imagine. So as a way to conclude these remarks, I go back to you, new graduates, because as I said, you are the heroes of the day. So what could be for you the lessons of these brief remarks on the European Union at 25? The European Union is more or less your age, younger than you are. So, okay? So what could be the lessons for you young professionals about to begin or to continue further your professional lives in the fields of business and development, and also at the intersection of the private and public sectors, of the local, national, regional, and global sectors? I think that 3 possible lessons come to mind. First, as I said, the European Union is here to stay. The European Union is not going to disappear. Despite all the difficulties, it will continue to be a major actor in the world to come. I really believe that. So, in other words, as young professionals in the areas of development, management, business, the economy in general, the European Union and the legacy, good or bad, of the Treaty of Maastricht, good and bad, are likely to be part of your professional universe. Even if today the European Union and Europe in general are maybe not as trendy as Asia and America, for you and your career, having studied here at Maastricht is going to be a major plus, a major asset. It's going to give you connections and opportunities. This I totally guarantee. And Wim too, right? Yes, good. Second lesson. what I said earlier about political leadership in the European context goes beyond Europe and politics, of course. I think it also entails lessons for you. It also applies to you. Tomorrow, you will have major professional responsibilities. And as you progress in your career, your responsibilities will only grow, the stress too, probably. And your place as a leader will only become more important. So in this regard, I think that it would be important for you to remember that a good leader, including in the world of business, is one who listens and understands what makes sense for people he or she leads. A good leader is also one who tries to bring what I could call meaningful meaning to the life of those he or she leads. I think it's quite important, especially since you're going to have lives of leadership. Third and final lesson, and then you are free. The leaders, including business leaders, we tend to remember whom we truly respect and admire are not simply or first and foremost those who have exclusively succeeded for themselves and their company and line of work. They are those who have also contributed to the environment, to their society, to make them better. So my advice to you is to work hard. Of course, you should always work very hard. You should have ambitions. Of course, you should always have ambitions. Ambitions for you, but also for the environment in which you live. It is true that today more and more people are going to school, including to graduate school, as you did here in Maastricht. But at the same time, the fact of the matter is that it is still a small minority of people who are lucky enough to pursue graduate studies. This is a fact of life. As such, having pursued graduate studies, as you did here, is really truly a privilege, but a privilege that gives responsibility toward others, toward society and the world to which you belong. So it comes with a string attached, as they say in the US. So graduates, with your new degree in hand, fly far and well, and help also others as much as you can to fly far and well. This is my message. So I thank you for your consideration, and once again, congratulations, graduates of 2016.